A father is just a gray-haired ATM. First, you sign the checks, then you give a lecture. Honestly, you're just not special enough for a seat at our table. Lena tossed her phone on the counter like a piece of junk mail. Max, my son, sat silent, his knuckles rapping a nervous rhythm against his thigh. He couldn't meet my eyes. I felt something crack inside my chest, like an old, dry door latch. I asked slowly, my voice clear, not special enough? Lena raised an eyebrow, her smile cold. Only special people were invited. And about this month's rent, you forgot to send it. I set my keys on the counter. Yeah, well, from now on, I only help special people. And special families, they pay their own rent. The air in the room froze. Max looked up, his face pale. Dad, that's cruel. Cruel? I nodded, but accurate. Lena put her hands on her hips, her voice hard. What rent? I stood, walked to my office, and came back with a file. I opened the leather-bound ledger. The bank statements rustled as I turned the pages. ACHRN 0524281 rent shortfall, ZLZL 0419771 wedding dress deposit, check has Hongwan Net 19 air conditioner repair, 36 months, the total $33,400. Max swallowed hard. Lena's smile was faint, but her lips were trembling. I closed the book. Love doesn't need a ledger, a transaction does. And today, the transaction is over. Over 99% of you will watch this story to the end without hitting like or subscribe. It's actually pretty easy, it just takes a single click. What time is it, where you are, and where are you listening from? I placed the ivory envelope on the kitchen table with its scratched paint, right in the slant of sun that cut through the window each afternoon. $1,000 in crisp new bills, the edges straight, held by a small black paper clip. Beside it was the brown leather-bound ledger, the same one I'd used since my days pulling electrical cable through Ohio. Snows open to this month's page. The entry neat. ACH max rent shortfall $1,150. Ref RN 0524281. I didn't call it help. I logged it as shortfall. It sounded more factual and less painful. Linda's cufflinks were in their small, velvet-lined box, engraved with RG. She commissioned for our 30th anniversary. I'd polished them this morning, even though I was only making a phone call, not going anywhere. An old man's habit, polishing the remnants of the past as a form of politeness to memory. I dialed Max. 3 rings. I pictured my son somewhere, maybe in the kitchen with the marble countertops I'd paid for, maybe near the wine rack I'd helped stock. The voice on the other end wasn't Max's, it was Lena, clear as a silver spoon tapping against a glass. Robert, we got married yesterday at Lakeview. It was just for special people. The word special landed like a single grain of sugar dropped on a tile floor, tiny, clean, and impossible to pick back up. I heard myself ask, very softly, "Oh, I see." I didn't hang up right away. I held the line, listening to Lena's even breathing, listening to a silence just long enough to know Max was there, quiet as someone standing just outside the door, waiting for the rain to stop so he wouldn't have to bother with an umbrella. "Congratulations," I said, still polite, the kind of thing any decent man at the VFW would say. I didn't ask what the dress cost, or what flavor the cake was. I set the phone down next to the envelope. I closed the lid on the cufflink box. In my mouth, the word special tasted like an antacid. On the kitchen shelf was the $300 bottle of whiskey I'd bought for Max's birthday. I watched him pour the $300 whiskey I'd bought to self-made men without a glance my way. I replayed it like a short clip. Max raising his glass, his friends' laughter almost too bright. To being self-made, they said. I'd nodded from a corner, an old utility pole still standing after a blizzard. That day, Lena had hugged me in front of everyone. Her hug felt hollow, like cardboard painted gold, a performance for the porches looking on. Mrs. Gable from across the way would have had to squint through her blinds to see it all. A ting announced a text message. It was Mrs. Gable sending a Facebook link. "Congrats to the happy couple, number family only." I opened it out of politeness to an old neighbor and the curiosity of an old man. Wedding photos from the Lakeview Country Club, the kind of place where men play golf and then pose for pictures by by the water. The sun edged Lena's hair, making it look like a shampoo commercial. Her parents stood close, shoulder to shoulder, smiling the way people who have everything do. I zoomed in, counting faces. I looked for Max. I looked for the empty space where I should have been. There wasn't one. I saw Mrs. Gable across the street, pausing her dog walk. I wondered what story she'd tell herself. Family unity or family theater? She'd probably think, oh, he must have been busy. In this suburb, people are polite to the truth by calling it a misunderstanding. I closed the phone and turned back to the ledger. The numbers here didn't know how to lie. Each line item for a rent shortfall, each top-up for an electric bill to keep it from being shut off, each receipt for a new set of pans for your kitchen. She stroked the marble my bonus paid for. Finally, a space that feels like us. I could still hear Lena sigh in my head. Finally, a space of our own. I had smiled that day. What was I going to say? That's a space with my bank account's name on it? I lifted the envelope, the crisp paper cool in my hand. $1,000 usually isn't heavy, except in your chest. I slid the envelope into the middle of the ledger, using it as a ruler to draw a straight blue ink line under the last entry. Then I wrote, pending wedding gift. I ended it with a period. My eyes stopped on the reference number, RN0524281. I didn't know all the codes by heart, but I remembered the dates, the smiles, the phrases like, Daddy, we just need a little help this month. I'd been helping with just this month for 30-some months, because being a father in the Midwest, they teach you to stand as a windbreak for your kids, even after they're taller than you are. I pushed my chair back. The kitchen was gleaming because I scrubbed it this morning, a rhythmic labor that felt like a kind of prayer. The cast iron pan hung in its proper place. The paper towels were folded into a neat V. The cereal boxes were all facing the same direction, the small things I did to keep the days from feeling too long. I heard the quiet hum of the air conditioner switching on, the neighbor's dog barking at the mailman, the faint jingle of the ice cream truck on the cross street. A normal afternoon in a normal neighborhood. American flags on porches, freshly painted white fences, lawns cut to HOA standards. I opened the cufflink box again, lightly touching the cool silver surface. RG. I didn't put them on. You shouldn't wear something ceremonial when you weren't invited to the ceremony. I set them on top of the box, watching the letters reflect the late afternoon Sunday. If Linda were here, she'd say, Rob, don't you mind it? The kids are just confused. Linda was good at making sharp things feel soft. I wasn't. I only knew how to turn them into lines of ink. The phone vibrated. Max's name flashed on the screen, then went dark. Flashed again, then went dark. I didn't pick it up. A principled politeness. The people who just told you they only invite special people can wait, they probably needed something urgently. In this life, people mostly call each other for the urgent things rent. A broken down car, a medical bill, the things that come with a price tag. Love rarely has a bill attached. On the shelf, next to the whiskey, was the blank card I'd intended to write. Your mother would have been so happy. I hope the two of you, I'd stop there. Not because I'd run out of words, but because I'd run out of a place to stand. I tore the card from its booklet but didn't throw it away. I slid it under the lid of the cufflink box. If I ever finished it, what would the first word be? Maybe dignity. Another ping. Not Mrs. Gable this time. It was an HOA group tag. A photo of Max and Lena's wedding shared by someone in the neighborhood happenings group, that polite American habit of advertising happiness like a garage sale. Someone had commented, beautiful family. I pressed the small gray heart next to it, not to like it, but to see the names of those who had. The crowd is a strange stage. They stand there, each with a mask in the shape of an avatar, ready to applaud anything framed beautifully. I closed the screen and looked back at my kitchen table. The envelope, the ledger, the cufflinks, the hidden card, the props of my life. I placed my hand on the ledger, feeling my own pulse against the paper. I thought of all the sentences that began with Dad. Dad, this month is a little tight. Dad, the air conditioner broke. Dad, Lena needs an advance. Those sentences had their own cadence, warm, fast, and always ending before the bank closed. Her hug felt hollow, a performance for the porches. I heard it again and wondered when a young person's hug had become a stage play. Maybe since pictures started deciding what was true, I stood and poured a little of the now cold coffee into a mug, taking a sip. Bitter. I was used to the taste. I'd once told Max, bitterness is the taste that reminds you you're awake. He laughed a little too loud, a little too bright. It was the sound of someone trying to paper over a deep crack in the foundation. I'd heard that laugh too many times to not know what it meant. The phone buzzed one more time. I looked at the screen without touching it. The voicemail icon now showed a small, deep red one. I left it there, a tiny red dot with enough power to pull the story into another day. I pulled the ledger closer and took a ballpoint pen from the mug, printed with the VFW logo. At the bottom of the page, just below the line reading pending wedding gift, I added a small note. Note, family only wedding photo tagged in HOA group. A data point, not an exclamation. If I've learned anything after 69 years, it's this. Data makes people quiet. Complaining just makes them talk louder. I closed the book. Before I shut the cover, I added one more word, tiny, in the corner. Special. From a distance, it looked like a stray ink blot, but I knew it was there. And I knew it would come back to me, like a pocket knife in the coat pocket. Not to threaten anyone, but to remind myself that what is taken away with words can one day be taken back with them too. I cleared the table. The envelope went in the top drawer, the cufflink box in the second, and the ledger underneath, where I keep the heaviest things. The rubber mallet, the wire cutters, and now the truth. The sun had moved to the opposite wall. In the sink, there was only a single mug, clean and upside down. Everything was in its proper place, except for one thing. Me, the father, on the edge of the family-only photo. The wind chimes on the porch tinkled, as if someone had just walked by. I saw Mrs. Gable across the street, pausing her dog walk. I peeked through the blinds, just enough to see her silhouette and the small dog. I let the blind fall. In this neighborhood, people are so polite, they pretend not to see the things everyone sees. I touched the phone. The red dot was still there. Only special people. I whispered again, this time to hear if my voice would shake. It didn't. It was low and even, the kind of voice a man gets after seeing enough winters to know how to change the furnace filter on the right day. I set the phone down, the voicemail unopened. That could wait. A man gets to choose when he answers. Before turning off the kitchen light, I looked around the room one last time. The objects looked back at me, quiet and loyal. I nodded at them, like saying goodbye at the end of a shift. Then I turned off the light, leaving a single red dot glowing on a dark screen, a reminder, a pilot light, a fork in the road. Tomorrow, if anyone asks why I wasn't in the picture, I just say I was busy. Busy putting things back under their correct names. Busy learning to use data instead of please. And before I went to sleep, I might just add one more line to the ledger. Call back tomorrow. Not to explain, but to put the answer right where it belonged. I sat in the kitchen, bright with the afternoon sun, the wooden tabletop worn smooth from years of scrubbing. In front of me was the brown leather-bound ledger, the only thing in this house that still kept its discipline, its straight lines, its composure. The voicemail icon on my phone was still blinking. I wasn't in a hurry. I poured a little of last night's leftover coffee into a mug and warmed it with some hot water from the kettle. The coffee was old, bitter, and weak, but it was enough to pull my mind out of its rut. I pressed play. Lena's voice came on, soft but with a synthetic glaze. Robert, I'm calling because the rent is a little late this month. The landlord is pushing. Max is really stressed. I think you must have forgotten to make the transfer. We always do it the first Wednesday, right? Please call me back. A pause. Then Max's voice, muffled, in the background. Ask nicely. Lena gave a thin laugh and added, we're hoping you can help us out. We're family, after all. I let the voicemail play 2 more times, letting the final words dissolve into the air. Her use of family hit the kitchen wall and vanished like steam from a pot lid. On the table, the envelope from the bank I received last week was still sitting there. I opened the ledger, turning to this month's page. The blank entry was waiting, pending wedding gift. Below it, the white space felt like an open wound. I picked up my pen and wrote a note. Rent overdue, again. My pen hovered, remembering every check that vanished, without thanks. The phone rang again. This time, Lena was calling directly. I answered, Dad, I'm sure you got the message. The rent is, I got the voicemail. I cut her off. A second of hesitation. Then Lena took a breath, her voice shifting to one of urgency. Yes, the landlord is getting antsy. We moved into the Lakeview apartment. The deposit was huge. Max, I remember Lakeview, I said. Beautiful place, family only. I kept the two English words just as they were, letting them land with a cold, metallic sound. On the other end, I heard a sharp intake of breath. Dad, about the wedding. I know, only special people. The silence that fell was as heavy as a lead weight. I glanced out the window. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, had stopped on the lawn with her corgi. She pretended to bend down and pick up a leaf, but her eyes were fixed on my house. I saw Mrs. Gable peeking. Was this a barbecue or a well-rehearsed play? In this town, privacy was a rare commodity. Dad? Lena started again, her voice sinking. I'm sorry if I said something that upset you. I thought you were busy. And Max, Lena, I interrupted, my pen poised over the ledger. Yes? I only help special people. The silence on the other end was rigid. I stressed the word special slowly, like hammering a nail into a board. It echoed back, sharp and final. The sentence sliced through the quiet, killing whatever pre-planned pleas she had ready. Dad, I understand. I was wrong. But this time, Max just got a new car, and I have fewer shows this month. We need some time. Dad, we're family. I took a breath, letting my words find their rhythm. Special families pay their own rent. I heard the scrape of a chair. Max came on the line. Dad, you there? I'm here. I'm sorry. Lena said a stupid thing, but then fix it, I said. By doing your part. Max's voice turned sharp. We're family. I'm not supposed to do anything. Supposed to is how you kids turn other people into your own personal ATMs. I sat up straighter, writing a new line in the ledger. Stop discretionary support. Effective today. Lena grabbed the phone back, her voice frantic. Dad, if not today, then tomorrow? The landlord is going to... I'm not sending the money. Just this one time? Which one time? We've had too many one times already. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. I put my pen down and drew a firm check mark next to the line I had just written. It felt like checking a circuit breaker after a snowstorm. Outside, Mrs. Gable pulled her corgi along. The leash went taut. I knew what she'd be telling someone later. Robert looked like he was having an argument on the phone. The suburban news always traveled faster than the local paper. Texts started coming in, a picture of a red notice taped to their apartment door. Pay or quit. A message from Max. Dad, please answer. He's threatening to kick us out. I turned the page in my ledger, leaving the red notice to sit in my phone's memory. I didn't reply. Silence in the right dose is more powerful than any tirade. The word special repeated in my head like a newly sharpened blade. I tipped a new note to the refrigerator, right next to the fish-shaped magnet. No loans, no co-signing, no cash, no bending the rules for tears. It looked ridiculous, but it fit this house, where everything had its own container, its own label. I sat down and tried to say the sentence one more time, just to test its strength. I only help special people. My voice was low and steady. The words fit into place like a lock clicking shut. Outside, the sprinklers on the Browns' lawn shut off. The manicured stage of the suburban yard went dark. I felt a lightness in my chest, as if I had just set a heavy weight down on the concrete floor. The rules of the game had just changed hands. On Saturday morning, I cleared the kitchen table and laid out a stack of bank statements nearly 2 inches thick. The credit union printer had been running all last night, swallowing reams of white paper and spitting out cold, hard numbers. I placed the brown leather-bound ledger in the center as if it were the only Bible I needed right now. Beside it, I set a yellow highlighter and an old, clacking Casio calculator. Not everyone chooses to start their morning by confronting numbers. But today, I knew I had to. The first page, May, 3 years ago. A neat line of print. ACHRN052421. Rent age, $1,050. I remembered that month. Lena had said, The landlord raised the rent unexpectedly, and they needed me to cover the difference. I drew the yellow highlighter across the number. The next page, June rent odd. 125. The month after, 125. The month after, 1,150. Each highlighted line was another yellow streak. It felt like I was marking the cracks in the wall of a house 1, then 2, then the whole section was exposed. Each highlight wasn't just ink. It was a scar. I remember the night Max brought out the $300 bottle of whiskey I'd given him, pouring it generously for his friends, and raising a glass to self-made men. Not a single glance in my direction. I drank with my eyes, not with my mouth. The statements jumped to November. ZL0419771650. I wrote in the margin, wedding dress. Lena had texted me then, I'll pay you right back. I just need to hold my spot today. 3 years later, right back still hadn't arrived. On page 14, I saw check Hasson19 $680. The note, AC repair. It had been brutally hot that day, and they called me. The air conditioner is screaming like an airplane. The baby can't sleep. I wrote the check and drove it over. A week later, I discovered the repair bill had been paid online. Where had my money gone? No one ever explained. I let it go. That was the scar that cut deeper. Page 18. HOA fine. $150. They were fined for putting the trash out on the wrong day. I paid it to make the problem go away, to save them the trouble. But in that moment, I had turned myself into the trash can for all their consequences. I continued to tally the numbers. Rent gap. An average of $1,100 divided by month times 30 months equals $33,000. Utilities and arrears. Approximately $85 divided by month x 24 equals $2,040. Car note top-ups. $200 x 8 equals $1,600. AC repair, $60. HOA fines, $315. Insurance catch-up, $600. Wedding deposit, $900. Miscellaneous emergency, runs. Gas, groceries, pharmacy, uguale a $1,8. I added it all up. The Casio's display read $39,735. I already calculated this time by hand. In reality, some months were less and the fee expense overlapped. I adjusted the total down to $39,735. I already calculated this time by hand. In reality, some months were less and that few expense overlapped. I adjusted the total down to $33,400. $33,400. The number just stood there. It didn't blame or beg. It just testified. $33,400. Not generosity, but evidence. I took a long, slow breath. My face felt hot. Not because I regretted the money, but because I realized I had let myself become their safety net for far too long. Every time I put out one of their fires, I called it a small thing. Now, added up, it felt like a verdict. I opened a new page in the ledger and wrote the refrain. I covered rent gaps every single month. I canceled a fishing trip with Bill to rush to the credit union before it closed. I skipped the dental appointment because Lena needed an advance for the dress. I covered the electric bill in the middle of a heat wave so their power wouldn't be cut off. I canceled my trip to visit Linda's grave on the 5th anniversary of her passing because I had to call an AC repairman for them. I skipped dinner at the VFW to drive a check over to Max's house. Each line was a time I had put myself last. In the reflection from the kitchen window, I saw the image of a gray-haired man in an old t-shirt. But this time, he wasn't looking down. I saw him writing carefully, line by line, entry by entry. Around noon, I took a stack of papers to the credit union to reprint a few faded pages. The teller, a young woman with her hair in a fishtail braid, looked at the pile and raised an eyebrow. Even the teller at the credit union raised an eyebrow when I printed 3 years of statements. Numbers don't gossip, but people do. I gave her a small smile and didn't explain. Back home, I printed a single sheet of A4 paper with a bold heading. Family Finance Principles. No loans, no co-signing, no cash. I taped it to the refrigerator door, right next to the fish-shaped magnet and the grocery store coupons. At the bottom, I added a small line in italics. No extensions for tears. I took a step back. The sign looked a little ridiculous, but it was the new law of this house. Principles, not feelings. Outside, the late afternoon sun slanted through the trees, casting a glow on the stack of statements on the table. The yellow, orange, and red highlighter marks overlapped like the rings of a tree. Every digit was a footprint of neglect. I closed the ledger and wrote on the cover. Phase 2. I made a list. Check all auto transfers, change the deadbolt, upgrade the cameras, turn on 2FA. Tomorrow, I would begin. Today, I had finished the work of an ordinary accountant, adding, subtracting, making notes. But for me, it wasn't just about the numbers. It was how I was taking back my dignity. As I turned off the kitchen light, I whispered to myself, 33,400. The number sounded both like a judgment and a prayer. And I felt a lightness in my chest, as if I had finally paid off a long overdue debt, the debt of discipline I owed to myself. On Monday morning, I took the SB36 packet to the credit union I'd been using for 20 years. The air was cool, the sun, even across the lot full of old pickups. I arrived half an hour before the peak rush, the habit of a man who likes to control what can be controlled. The glass door slid open, and the smell of new carpet mixed with the plastic scent of the printer. Station 2 flipped its open light. Good morning, Mr. Robert, Mr. Klein looked up, his glasses perched low on his nose, the kind of man who's seen every kind of customer story but never offered public judgment. What can I do for you today? I need to stop all unencumbered auto transfers, I said slowly, placing the packet on the counter, and open a secondary account. ACAC number 7,114-09 for personal expenses only. Finally, enable 2FA on all online services. He nodded, pulled the chair over for me, and began ticking off the documents. We'll take it step by step. First, identity verification. Do you have your driver's license and social security card? I pulled out my wallet. The license was old and worn. The leather edges curled like the ledgers I'd used back when I was climbing utility poles. Right here. Klein placed them on the scanner. It beeped. Then a red light blinked. He frowned. Seems like a connection issue. My apologies. Let me reset the system. He logged out, logged back in, and asked me to sign Form KYC update. I signed, my hand firm. This time, the machine beeped twice, and the light turned green. All right. He pulled up the auto transfer screen. A list appeared, RN0524281, ZL0419771 ACH rent AJ, various utility top-ups. You want all of these stopped? All of them, I said. Anything without a legal binding or a contract in my name, stop it. Klein typed quickly, the screen filling with gray cancel tags. He printed a notice of termination for each one. Sign here and here. I signed, listening to the printer's reliable ka-chunk as it spat out the black and white proof, the thing I'd been missing most this past months. Next, the secondary account. Klein entered the information, typing away. Act number 7,114-09 is created. I recommend setting up alerts for every transaction and scheduling a recurring transfer from your main account a small amount. $300 a week, I said. Enough for food, gas, incidentals. Done. He hit enter. Now for 2FA. We'll enable SMS and an authenticator app. Do you have your phone? I handed over the old smartphone. Klein showed me the QR code. I opened the app, scanned it, and 6 blue digits appeared, changing every 30 seconds like an industrial heartbeat. He read it back. 2 layers of protection. From now on, anyone trying to access your account needs both your password and your device. He smiled. It's not a concrete wall, but it's close. One can conjure the first wall, I replied, tucking the cards. And confirmation slips into the packet. Thank you, Klein. He nodded. You're doing the right thing. Still remembers, deadbolts do not lie. He said the second part half-jokingly, as if he knew what I was doing next. At noon, I called Summers Locksmith, the shop catty-corner from the church. Mr. Summers was the one who'd cut my spare keys 15 years ago. I'll be there at 2 p.m., he said over the phone. Bring an NC Grade 1 deadbolt. At 1:55 p.m. sharp, the white van pulled up. The door slid open, and Summers stepped out, a man in his 60s, broad-shouldered, squinting against the sun, carrying a toolbox full of cylinders, screws, and a rubber mallet. A young apprentice followed with an aluminum ladder. "Hey, Rob," Summers nodded in that familiar way, his eyes quickly scanning my door frame before settling on the old lock. He grabbed the knob and turned it. The latch clicked open far too easily. He frowned. The old lock clicked open too easily, like trust worn smooth by years of careless hands. I smiled. "Let's change it." He laid down a small mat and unpacked the deadbolt. "This is Grade 1, meant for main entrances, high impact resistance, steel core, long throw bolt. Product code SMR DBG 12024. I'm writing up your work order. SMR W1442. He pulled out a pad, wrote quickly by hand, and showed it to me. "This set comes with 4 keys code KX5812. Want us to rekey the handle knob to match?" "Yes," I said. "1 key for everything." "Got it." He started removing the old hardware, the screws turning snake, then set the new deadbolt into the board hole, tapping it gently into place with a rubber mallet. Thump, thump. With every turn of the screw, I felt a worry tighten behind my back, like armor being properly fastened. The apprentice stood by the gate, watching the street. The wind caught the American flag on the porch, making the maple leaves shudder. "Kids these days," Summers muttered, testing the lock one last time. Mouths say independence, but hands demand subsidies. Sorry, slipped out. He said it loud enough for the whole street to hear. That was a verdict, not small talk. "I heard you," I replied calmly. He nodded. Acknowledgement received. Lock solid. He handed it to me to try. I turned the key, and the bolt slid into the heavy metal strike plate with a deep, satisfying clunk. No sound on earth is as reassuring as the clunk of a new deadbolt. Summers installed a reinforcer plate on the door frame, using 3-inch screws driven deep into the stud. "This is the second layer. Makes it harder to kick in." He handed me a small bag with the 4 KX5812 keys. "You keep 3, I'll label 1 and put it in the lockbox out front, just in case you get locked out." "I won't forget," I said, then chuckled. "But leave it, just in case." He filled out the receipt, crossing off the 6-month maintenance MSA 9 line. "Anything goes wrong, call me. No charge within the period." He packed up, looking around the house, the kind of craftsman who doesn't just do the job. A lock won't keep a decent person out, but it holds the line. "Today, you redrew the border." "The second wall," I said. He winked and got in the van. The door slid shut with a sound as thin as a blade. At 3:30 p.m., Ethan Summers' son arrived with a cardboard box stamped with the camera company logo. "Hey, Uncle Rob." The 30-something with a buzz cut smiled quickly, opening the box. NVR8CH model, NVRA1F93. 4 dome cameras, C2217, C2218, C2219, C2220, Cat 6, cable, adapters, anchor bolts. "Survey it for me," I said, handing him a hand-drawn map of the house. "I want the front gate, the side access, the backyard, and the garage. I don't want the cameras pointing at the neighbors. I like to stay legal, respect the privacy." "Got it," Ethan said, pulling on gloves and grabbing the ladder. He walked the perimeter, looking at the eaves, estimating the 110-degree view angles. Cam 1, C2217, front porch 9 feet up, watching the street. Cam 2, C2218, side path. Cam 3, C2219, backyard, avoiding a direct shot into the kitchen window. Cam 4, C2220, garage, covering the driveway. Any blind spots I need to avoid. "The storage locker on the side porch, keep that out of frame," I replied. "And the bedroom windows, don't scan them directly." "Done," he said. "I'll set a black privacy mask for those areas." He drilled pilot holes a short, neat bzz. The Cat 6 cable ran along the eaves, clean as a lifeline. Sweat beaded on Ethan's forehead, but his work was steady. I brought out lemonade. "Thanks, Uncle Rob." He wiped his brow and plugged the cables into the NVR-A1 F93 near the router. The TV screen showed 4 split frames. I saw myself in Cam 1, an old man standing straight on the porch, eyes forward. Ethan went into the settings, enabled motion detection, drew exclusion zones with the mouse to ignore the swaying maple tree. He set up push notifications to my phone and tested an alert. My phone buzzed. Motion detected. Cam 1, 1547. I smiled. A red LED blinked on the NVR, an unblinking witness. I set retention to 14 days, Ethan said. After 14 days, it overwrites. If you want longer, you need a bigger HDD. I also enable timestamp and watermark, so if you ever need to print evidence, the court accepts it easily. Enough, I said. I don't want to turn the house into a fortress. I just don't want the truth to skip past me. Ethan printed the installation diagram, labeled each camera, noted the serial number and location. He handed over the manual, wrote down the 6-month maintenance MSA9 and the 24/7 hotline number. If there's an issue, call. I'll come. He looked at the street. You should put up a small sign. Property under video surveillance. It doesn't stop everyone, but it makes them think twice. Put it up now, I said. He grinned, pulled a small aluminum sign from the box and screwed it into the porch post. Snick, snick. Done, Ethan said. 3 walls, money, door, eyes. He quoted back the words I'd said at noon, his way of saying goodbye. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, the hand of someone who works with real things. As evening fell, the house sounded different. My ears picked up new small sounds. The deep clunk of the deadbolt when I locked the door. The short beep of the authenticator app when I checked my accounts. The steady whir of the NVR fan like a slow heartbeat. I sat at the table and wrote in the ledger. Bank. Stop auto transfers. Notice attached. Opened act number 7114-09. Enable 2 FA auth app plus SMS. Locksmith. Deadbolt ANSI grade 1. Wohl SMR. Wohl 1442. Veer keys KX 5812. Reinforced plate installed. Cameras. NVR A1 F93. Cam 14 C2217 C2220. Privacy mask set. Motion alerts on. Service. 6-month maintenance. MSA 9. I clipped the receipts, contracts, and diagrams into the manila folder. Each piece of paper closed a gap. Each signature was like a brick filling a void that had existed for too long. I prepared a checklist of emergency contacts to tape inside the cabinet door. Weber, lawyer. Number. Klein Credit Union. Number. Summers Locksmith. Number. I. Number. Non-emergency police. Number. Trusted neighbors. Mrs. Brooks. Mrs. Gable. Number. I added one final line. Small. Max and Lena. Text only. Archived. No calls. No arguments. No transfers. Everything must leave a trace. I held a pen and wrote as if driving a nail. Documentation is oxygen. When the storm of emotion hits, I breathe through black ink on white paper. Before bed, I stepped onto the porch. The wind carried the scent of cut grass and the neighbor's barbecue smoke. I turned the key, heard the deadbolt clunk. That sound wasn't to scare anyone. It was to reassure me. Still remembers. Deadbolts do not lie. I looked at Cam 1, still up on my phone. The porch was dimly lit by the yellow backlight. The flagpole stood straight, the aluminum sign, property under video surveillance, catching a small glint. I saw my own shadow in the frame, a dark shape going inside, the door closing. A notification popped up. Door locked. Cam 1 2011. I tapped OK. In the living room, I turned off the lights. The house was quiet. The small red light on the NVR dotted the darkness with patient vigilance. I lay down, listened to my own heartbeat, no longer skipping at the sound of an urgent call. Tangible piece. A new lock, a cancelled mark on a bank screen, and a small red dot signaling that something was watching for me, asking for nothing, taking no credit. Tomorrow, if they came, they'd meet steel bolts instead of wooden latches, text-only requests instead of arguments, closed accounts instead of leaking funds. 3 walls were up, money, door, eyes, and for the first time in months, I saw my sovereignty not as an idea, but as an artifact. I closed my eyes and slept like a soldier who had finished his watch. Out there, the suburban street remained silent. But in the dark, I knew someone wouldn't stay silent for long. How would they retaliate when the locks and the wallet were both closed? The question sat quietly at the edge of the bed, like a folded pocketknife. Tomorrow, if it snapped open, I had the paper trail and the red light on my side. The strange silver sedan was parked close to the curb. I knew something was wrong immediately. The front door was slightly ajar, the new deadbolt I'd installed yesterday no longer engaged. My heart hammered, but my hand was steady. I opened my phone and scrolled through the camera feed. Cam 1 reported, door open 1441, and Cam 2 reported motion 1442. In the grainy, blue-tinted frame, a silhouette moved around the living room coffee table. I stepped inside, and the creak of the door was like a starting pistol. Papers were strewn across the table. Max was slumped on the sofa, his eyes dark-ringed. Lena paced, clutching a black binder. A stranger, a man in a gray suit with graying hair and thin-rimmed glasses, looked up. Fisher, their lawyer. He was standing in my living room as if it were his own office. "Dad," Max began, his voice tight. "We need to talk." I looked directly at Fisher, not blinking. "Who gave you permission to enter my home?" He extended a hand, his smile so polite it was synthetic. "Dr. Richard Fisher, I'm here to assist your son and daughter-in-law. They're concerned about your financial capabilities. There have been some signs." "I'm not shaking your hand," I cut him off, moving to gather the papers, turning them face down on the table. "My house, my papers, out." "Good sound." Lena rushed forward, her voice syrupy sweet. "Dad, it's just a temporary power of attorney. A small POA, so I can help you pay bills, manage the accounts. It's nothing serious. It can be revoked at any time." Fisher added, his voice as smooth as a bank commercial. "This is a durable power of attorney with limited financial authority. It's a narrow scope, just to help you with payments, to avoid any risks. We want to protect you." "Protect who?" I asked. "Your family," he answered, without hesitation. I sat down in my armchair, my eyes fixed on the black binder. "Who unlocked my door?" Max cleared his throat and raised a hand. "I have an old key. I was worried about you. You weren't answering my texts." "The camera calls that motion 1442, I replied, holding up my phone, breaking and entering, with evidence. Through the sheer curtains, I saw Mrs. Brooks walking by, her pace slowing. A silent jury was forming out there. Lena lowered her voice, as if playing a role in a family drama. "You're angry about the wedding, I know. But this POA is just to make things easier with the bank, the landlord. You can't keep track of everything." "I didn't forget," I said, my voice cold as steel. I stopped. "The difference is the verb." Fisher folded his hands, adjusting his glasses. "If you refuse, the court may be forced to appoint a temporary guardianship. A legal guardian would manage your finances for you. It's a common solution." "Guardianship," I repeated, stressing each syllable. "You call it a bitter pill. I call it a takeover." The air grew heavy. Max gritted his teeth. "Dad, you're not being reasonable. You're hurting yourself. What if you get scammed?" "I'm not being scammed. I changed the locks, installed cameras, and enabled 2FA. I just stopped being your personal mobile bank." As an pass. Lena shot a quick glance at Fisher, and then the words slipped out. "Besides, this house will be ours one day anyway." "It will be ours one day anyway." The room fell completely silent. The sentence dropped onto the floor like a piece of shattered glass. I let it echo for a beat, then slowly turned to Fisher. "You just heard your client. They aren't protecting me. They're protecting the asset they already consider theirs." At the very mark, Fisher's expression didn't change, but his hand was a little slower as he straightened his papers. "I am here to avoid litigation." "Good. I like the law," I said, pulling the SP36 packet from the drawer. I slid the printouts from the credit union across the table to him. The word "cancelled" stamped in bold gray ink. "The automatic transfers have been stopped. I have a separate account. Act number 7114-209. The new deadbolt is logged under work order SMRWO 1000, 442. The cameras are on MVRA1 F93. Everything is legal. No one needs a guardian. Max slammed his hand on the cushion. You have to sign it. If you don't, we'll take this to court. Then do it, I replied. I picked up the POA binder, walked into the kitchen, and opened the lid of the stainless steel trash can. The sound of the binder hitting the metal was a loud clang. I turned back. My house, my papers, out. Lena's face was pale. Fisher gathered his documents. Max's eyes were red. They threatened to petition for guardianship. I just said, please do. I have my lawyer, Weber. He prefers evidence to emotion. Outside, the neighbors were still standing there. A jury that doesn't need a jury box, just a suburban porch. I opened the door and gestured. Please leave. Fisher gave a polite nod. Max stared at the floor, and Lena tried to whisper a weak apology. I replied, don't apologize. The truth already spoke for you. When they were gone, I locked the deadbolt. The clunk was deep and final. The living room was as quiet as a courtroom after the gavel falls. I sat down at the table, opened my ledger, and added a new entry. 1441. Come in, door open. 1442. Comes wide motion. Max, Lena, Fisher entered. POA. Photo of cover taken. Verbal, it will be ours one day anyway. Action. POA discarded. I called Weber. His voice on the other end was dry and calm. Elder financial abuse. I'll handle the rest. Send me the clips and the receipts. Even, Armas. I hung up and poured myself a glass of tea. In the quiet room, I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and strong. The anger was still there, but it was contained, like an electrical current that's been properly grounded. Powerful, but it wouldn't burn the house down. I looked up at the blinking red LED on the camera, a witness that couldn't lie. And I knew, from now on, I was no longer defending. I was on the attack, armed with the law and the truth. The next morning, I drove to the offices of Weber and Associates. The street was quiet, lined with blazing red maple trees, the building a respectable red brick with a polished brass plaque. I carried a briefcase with my files, the printed bank statements, the screenshots from the NVR, and the ledger. Everything was neatly clipped inside the manila folder. Inside, the carpet was charcoal gray, and the air smelled of new paper and coffee. The receptionist, a blonde woman with her hair in a high ponytail, handed me a client intake form. I sat down and slowly filled it out. Reason for consultation, home intrusion, coercion to sign a POA, threats of guardianship, suspected elder financial abuse. I paused when I wrote the words elder abuse. Elder abuse. The words looked clinical on Weber's form, but they cut like a diagnosis. It was a cold, medical label, but when applied to my own story, it felt like a knife carving into skin. I signed my name, the pen making a sharp click against the tabletop. The conference room door opened. Weber, a man in a light blue shirt, dark tie, with salt and pepper hair, walked in carrying a thick file. He extended a hand, the shake quick and firm. Robert. His voice was low and steady. I reviewed the email you sent last night, Weber said, opening his laptop. The clip from 1440 to 1520 is clear. We'll mark that as Exhibit A. He pulled the document from his file, his voice even. First, we need to call this what it is. This isn't a family disagreement. This is elder financial abuse. At the state level, financially exploiting a person over 60 through deception, coercion, or abuse of trust is a crime. At the federal level, there are coordinating programs. In short, it's a crime. I was silent, but the weight lifted from my chest. I had suspected it, but now it had a name and the law. Weber turned to the next page. Guardianship is a court proceeding where someone is appointed to manage your affairs when you're deemed incapacitated. The standard of proof is high, usually requiring medical evaluation. Them showing up at your house with a lawyer, presenting a temporary POA, and then threatening guardianship, that's a classic coercion tactic, a form of financial duress. He took out another manila folder and pushed it toward me. Case intake number WBINV0924. From now on, this is the official file. The initial retainer is $2,000 $500. I wrote check Hassan137 and noted retainer WBINV0924 in the memo line. Weber nodded and clipped it into the file. Case intake number WBINV0924 wasn't just paperwork. It was armor. A suit of armor made of paper, but it fit snugly. Now, let's build our evidence checklist, Weber said, writing directly on the whiteboard. Video divided by NVR, clip 14, 40, 15, 20. Still frames, license plate captures. Audio, Lena's statement. It will be ours one day anyway. About ZU, paper trail. 36 months of bank statements. The $33,400 ledger. ACH, Zelle, and check transaction codes. Bank docs. Notice of auto transfer cancellation. Opening of Act number 7114-09, 2FA enablement. Logs and cameras. Receipts from Summers and Ethan. Cameras. Work order numbers. WO1442, MSA 9. Witnesses. Mrs. Brooks, Mrs. Gable neighbors who observed. Communications. All texts, emails, and voicemails transcribed. Capacity eval. A medical report, if needed to counter a guardianship petition. Demand the letter to be sent immediately, demanding they cease all attempts at coercion and trespass. I nodded. Weber added, and be aware, this won't be fast. The process is slow, be patient. The court's wrong on paper, not on anger. I have paper, I replied. I opened my phone and showed him the NVR log. Door opened 1441, motion 1442. I scrolled to 1556, when the silver sedan had returned and idled in front of my house for 2 minutes and 44 seconds. Get a still of that license plate, Weber said. A license plate frozen in pixels said more than any plea. I printed it out right there and put it in the folder. Exhibit A. Weber leaned back, his voice low. You did the right thing by cutting off the money and locking the doors. Now it's my turn to build a legal fence, but they may change tactics. Call Adult Protective Services, report you as paranoid, trigger a welfare check. If a social worker comes to your door, invite them in. Put me on speakerphone, answer briefly, and provide basic documentation. Nothing more. My heart rate slowed. With the law and the process in place, I felt less alone. After leaving the office, I stopped by Eleanor's house. She was watering her hydrangeas, a straw hat shielding her face. I told her the short version. File number WBINV0924, the $2,500 retainer, the evidence checklist. She placed a hand on my arm and squeezed gently. They tried the same on me, she whispered. My daughter brought a lawyer, too, with a POA. I signed it. It took a year to undo. Don't you sign a thing. You're on the right path. I'll be a witness if you need one. What Eleanor whispered, it wasn't confession. It was solidarity in the daylight. That evening, I organized the file, WBINV0924. Inside, video, 1,440 negative, 1,520. MP4, steel _ LP.jpg. Exhibit A, NVR log. PDF, Exhibit B, auto transfer, cancelled, PDF. Exhibit C, ledger, $33,400. PDF, Exhibit _D _POA _header.jpg. I printed each page, noting the date and time of printing. Each ink mark was a breath. An email arrived from Weber. Subject, demand, cease, and desist. The text was concise and cold. Any further entry will be considered trespass. Any further attempts to coerce a signature will be documented as elder financial exploitation. All future communications are to be directed through our office. I didn't reread it. I just forwarded it to myself and started. Documentation is oxygen. Outside, the streetlights cast a yellow glow. I stood watching through the curtains and saw the silver sedan drive slowly past my house again. The headlights swept across the small sign, property under video surveillance. The car paused for a moment, then drove on. I made a note. Loiter 1512 LP confirmed. I went back to the kitchen and looked at the family finance principles taped to the fridge. No loans, no cosign, no cash. I added another line with a marker. no signatures under pressure. Then I underlined it twice. Night fell, and the red light on the NVR blinked steadily. I lay in bed, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. The fear was still there, but it had changed shape. It was no longer a consuming darkness, but a clear checklist. I had the words, the law, and an ally. But a nagging question remained. Who just reported me as paranoid? Over 99% of you will watch this story to the end without hitting like or subscribe. It's actually pretty easy, it just takes a single click. What time is it, where you are, and where are you listening from? On Tuesday morning, while the air was still cold with dew, the doorbell rang twice, a neat, polite chime that sent a shiver down my spine. I walked to the control panel and pulled up the feed from Cam 1. On the porch stood a woman with brown hair, somewhere in her 40s, wearing a gray coat and holding an open leather wallet. She held her ID up to the lens. Marla Schmidt, County Department of Social Services. One, Ai Cha, Ai Tong. In a Midwestern town like mine, showing an ID to the camera is as important as a hello. Across the street, Mrs. Gable's curtains twitched. She was there again, her eyes fixed, as if every move I made was an episode in her personal television drama. Reputations live in windows. I opened the door, leaving the deadbolt halfway engaged. Excuse me, could I see that ID a little closer? She stepped forward and held it out. An embossed seal, the signature of the Director of Social Services, and a case number in bold print, DSS 082247. I unlatched the door but kept my phone to my ear. My lawyer will be joining us on speaker. A gruff voice came through the speakerphone. I'm listening, Robert. It was Weber. Schmidt nodded, her tone gentle. I'm here today to conduct a routine welfare check. We received an anonymous report. The allegation is that you've cut off financial support to your children, installed cameras due to delusions of being watched, are self-isolating and showing signs of paranoia. The words were clinical, but they landed like ice cubes. I took a breath, keeping my composure. Where would you like to start? With words or with paper? I'll just ask a few standard questions. I'll answer with documents, I interrupted. From the shelf, I pulled out the thick folder, the SP36 packet Weber had prepared. Each paper I laid on the wooden table was like the strike of a gavel. Exhibit B, the receipt for the auto transfer cancellation, stamped with a bold gray, canceled, and signed by client from the credit union. Exhibit C, the ledger totaling $33,400, with each item highlighted. Exhibit D, my tax returns and 3 utility bills, all paid on time. Exhibit E, the receipts from the locksmith and the camera installer, complete with work order and maintenance codes. I didn't go off my medication. I went off the unconditional dole, I said. The cameras are here to keep the facts straight, not to feed a delusion. Schmidt raised an eyebrow slightly and made a quick note. Do you have friends, a social support network? I have Eleanor next door, my group of old work buddies at the VFW, and I still attend church. I have this ledger, and I have Weber. Weber's voice cut in. Just the facts, Robert. Schmidt asked if she could look around. I agreed. In the kitchen, the pantry shelves were lined up, the spice jars all labeled. They called me paranoid, but my pantry shelves were straighter than their alibis. The bedroom, bed made, blanket folded into a neat square. The office, ledger open, pens laid parallel. On the fridge, the family finance principal sign was taped up straight. No loans, no cosign, no cash. When she returned, she sat down and made a checkmark. Mr. Collins, what I see is this. You are self-sufficient. Your finances are in order. Your home is clean. You have a social network. And there are no signs of self-harm. Regarding the paranoia allegation, I'd like to know the real reason for the cameras. I showed her the printed log. On the 14th, at 1441, the door was opened. At 1442, motion was detected. At 1558, a silver sedan idled in front of my house for 2 minutes and 44 seconds. Here's a photo of the license plate. She examined it closely and nodded. Properly time-stamped. I'll note that the cameras were installed following an incident and do not violate any privacy. Then she added another line, her handwriting small but clear. Family persistence is concerning. I paused. You just wrote persistence. Yes, Persistence that shows up at your door with a lawyer and paperwork, that's a concerning sign. It's usually about assets, not welfare. Outside, Mrs. Gable's curtains moved again. I could almost hear her whispering the afternoon news. At the end of the visit, Schmidt put her pen away and looked up. My preliminary conclusion: no immediate risk. My recommendation will be to close the file. Case number DSS082247. 2 words exploded in my mind, heavier than any judge's gavel. Case closed. Before she left, she lowered her voice. If they file for guardianship, you'll be served with papers. Don't be alarmed. It's a process. You'll be fine. I saw her to the door and heard the solid clunk of the deadbolt as I locked it. The house was quiet again, but my heart wasn't. My phone buzzed. An email from Weber with Schmidt CC'd. Client is competent. Please note all future family communications to be directed to counsel. I put up cam 1 again. Outside, standing at a distance, was Max, holding up his phone and taking a picture of the front of my house. I hit capture, saved the image, and sent it to Weber. He called immediately, adding it to file WBINV0924. I'll log it as a pattern of harassment. Get ready, Robert. After the wellness check fails, they'll escalate to the courts. I nodded slightly, though he couldn't see me. We've been waiting, and oh do. That night, I wrote in my ledger 11/5/1142, visit by DSS, case closed, recommended. Note, family persistence concerning. I drew a check mark. One more box ticked. But when my email lit up with a new notification cord, e-filing notification petition received, I knew the next battle had already begun. The court email arrived at 8:07 a.m. Polite and impersonal. Docket assigned FC2024 391 inches. The matter of Robert H. Lang, proposed ward. May is in the clay is a blee dot. My name, bracketed like a piece of seized property. I set my coffee mug down in its usual faded ring on the table, opened the WBIN V0924 folder, and took out a black felt tip pen. No sigh, no curse, just a new tab. Court. Weber called 3 minutes later. I just downloaded the petition. They're asking for a temporary guardianship. Witnesses: Lena, daughter-in-law; Davis, neighbor; Mr. Green pharmacist. They've also included a statement from a Dr. Lehman, no direct examination. Befullstumander Green? I repeated, the name catching in my throat. What did he sign? A boilerplate affidavit says you purchase medication irregularly, exhibit signs of confusion. Vague terms. My guess is someone put an insurance paper in front of him. Weber said, his voice flat. I could almost hear the chime of the pharmacy door. In the pharmacy line, Green lowered his voice. She said it was insurance paperwork. The customers behind us leaned closer. Community hears everything. In this town, bad news travels faster than thank you notes. I'm going to Green's pharmacy now, I said. The corner pharmacy still smelled of mint and new paper. Green, in the white coat with a blue ink stain on the pocket, froze for half a second when he saw me, then opened the door to the consultation room. The door clicked shut. He lowered his voice. Mr. Robert, about that paper, your daughter-in-law brought it in. She said it was for insurance. I glanced at it, looked like a general confirmation. I should have read it more carefully. I should have read it. I don't need a confession, I said, my tone soft but direct. I need a correction. I laid out the form Weber had prepared. AFF Pharma GR21. A new affidavit, stating clearly that the customer purchases only vitamins and aspirin, has no long-term prescriptions, and exhibits no signs of confusion. The undersigned was mistaken about the document's purpose, having been told it was for insurance verification. Green read it, his face flushing as if he just stepped out of a sauna. He exhaled. This is the truth. He signed, dated it, and stamped it with the pharmacy seal. The thump was deeply satisfying. Let me add a sentence. No irregular medication pattern observed. Good. I took a photo with my phone, scanned it, and saved it. Exhibit F, affidavit number GR21, pharma correction. As I left the counter, the line of customers behind me leaned in to listen. No one said, "Have a good day." In this town, the community hears everything with its ears, and through its curtains. Next was Davis. He opened his door a crack, the smell of stale cigarette smoke clinging to the blinds. "What now?" he grumbled. "I hear you're a witness." I kept my gaze level. "Do you have any facts other than I installed cameras?" Davis crossed his arms. "Cameras everywhere, that's paranoia. Nobody else on this block has them. Last Thursday night, I reminded him, the house 3 doors down had its garage broken into. You didn't mention that in your affidavit." Davis called my cameras paranoia. He never mentioned the break-in 3 doors down. Davis's eyes darted away. The court asked me a question. I answered it. "I don't want any trouble." "Trouble doesn't want you either," I replied, turning my back. The door clicked shut, the sound of a strong opinion with weak facts. At noon, I had my appointment with Dr. Moore for a competency evaluation code, PSY MR 221. Her office was bright, with a glossy rubber plant and a stopwatch in the center of the table. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a kind voice that offered no coddling. "Mr. Lang, I'll be assessing your memory, executive function, language, and financial literacy. There are no pretty right answers, just right answers." We began. Immediate recall of a word list. Then again after 10 minutes. Copying a 3D cube, subtracting 7 from 100. Retelling a short story in sequence. A 3-step read and perform task. For the financial section, I described 2FA, the reason for opening ACAC number 7114-09, my no loans divided by no cosign divided by no cash divided by no signatures under pressure rule, and the chain of custody for the NVR video, original plus copy, timestamp, stills, log. Let's say your son texts you with an emergency. He needs $1,200 in 2 hours for a security deposit, Dr. Moore asked. What do you do? I'd request written documentation, proof of the transaction, and call my lawyer before transferring anything, and I most likely wouldn't. My son's emergency is not my obligation, I said. She nodded, making a note. For the delayed recall portion, I remembered all 7 words. She printed a preliminary impression. Intact cognitive function. Excellent executive capacity. Understands finances. No evidence of paranoia or delusions. Sizes foreman. The full report, PSY MR 221, would be ready in 48 hours. I let out a breath. The psych test wasn't about memory. It was about dignity scored in points. Cold, impartial, and fair. Back home, an email from Weber was waiting. Send me GR21 now. I attached it. He replied with 2 words, filed as Exhibit F. Next, he sent a draft witness list. Eleanor, Mrs. Brooks, observation. Summers, and Ethan locks and cameras. Klein, credit union. Maria divided by Carmen divided by Alfreda from the garden club to attest to recent social activity. No fanfare, just clean names from a clean street. Weber called. Strategy? We attack their expert witnesses. Green is recanted GR. 21 neutralizes him. Lehman, no direct examination. I'll move to strike his statement. Davis, personal opinion. I'll confine his testimony to feelings. And more Psy, MR 221. That's our hammer. I think. I gave a small smile. We have the hammer, the anvil, and the nails. And the rhythm, Weber stressed. I'm following a motion in Leeming to exclude non-expert opinions. Remember, the court dislikes drama, but it loves procedure. In the afternoon, Eleanor brought over 2 sweating glasses of iced tea. After I told her everything, she nodded. You're peeling back the layers. They build a stage, and you're turning on the house lights. She winked. I'll wear my green dress to court. The color of a good, honest, garden variety witness. The social eye was still open. Mrs. Gable peeked through her blinds. The mailman paused an extra 10 seconds at my mailbox. This community loves a trial, even if they never sit in the jury box. I went inside and updated my ledger. FC 2024391 petition. TG temporary guardianship. Witnesses: Lena, Davis, Green. Exhibit F, GR21. Affidavit of Correction, signed. PSYMR, 221. Preliminary intact, divided by excellent, divided by no paranoia. Witnesses defense. Eleanor, Brooks, Summers, Ethan, Klein, garden dry ready. I taped another small note to the fridge. Affidavit number GR21 wasn't testimony. It was entrapment undone. Below it, underline, peel back the layers. At dusk, come one, pinged. I opened the feed. Lena was standing across the street, holding her phone chest high, slowly panning across the front of my house. Her lips were a thin line, her eyes cold. I hit capture, named the file Lena Curb 196, JPG, and sent it to Weber. Received, he replied. Logged as part of the pattern indirect harassment. We won't bring it up unless we have to. Keep it in reserve. I leaned against the door frame, my hand on the deadbolt. The steel was cool under my fingers. Amidst the cold codes and documents, I felt a strange warmth, not because they were any less malicious, but because the process was less of a mystery. I had learned a hard lesson: trust the process, not the people. From the kitchen corner, the clock ticked evenly. Outside, the porch light came on like the house lights in a theater before the show. I wondered, in court, what turns the tide? Maybe it's a number $33,400, read slowly. Maybe it's a slip of the tongue, it will be ours one day anyway. Or maybe it's just a technicality, no direct examination, Your Honor. Before turning off the lights, I received an email from Dr. Moore. Psi MR 221 finalized attached. I opened it. The official conclusion, a blue signature, a dry seal, another piece of armor. I forwarded it to Weber, ready for court. Night fell. The NVR blinked a single red beat. I closed my ledger and set my pen down neatly. At the bottom of the page, I wrote, tomorrow motion in limine, schedule hearing. Lingering question, what else do they have? That question will have to wait for part 9 inches, a courtroom where dignity doesn't need to shout, it just needs to speak in the right places. The docket, the affidavit, the evaluation. The solid clunk of a door is enough to silence a room, and sometimes that silence is the verdict. In the county courtroom, the morning light streamed through the tall windows, reflecting off wooden pews darkened by age. Robert sat at the respondent's table, his hands resting quietly before him, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. He no longer trembled as he had the day he saw the wedding photo from which he'd been excluded, or when he'd heard the cold words, only special people. Today, he had brought everything: the bank statements, the transfer slips, the receipts, the slanted, careful entries in his worn leather ledger, not to plead, but to prove. Their lawyer, Fisher, stood first, his voice warm but sharp. He painted a picture. Robert, elderly and paranoid, manipulated by delusions of being watched. A lonely old man installing cameras throughout his house for no reason. Fisher said paranoid as if it were a medical diagnosis, then added manipulated like a social verdict. Robert only tilted his head slightly, letting the accusations hang in the air, like smoke that would eventually clear on its own. Lena took the stand next. Her tears fell on cue. Her sobs measured just enough to stir sympathy. She called Robert her second dad, spoke of holidays where he'd bought the turkey, of the retirement money he'd spent on their new kitchen. The room was quiet for a few seconds, drawn into her touching story. But then came the cross-examination. Weber, Robert's legal counsel, stepped forward and asked, very gently, when was the last time you called Mr. Lane without mentioning money? Lena blinked. Silence. The silence stretched for so long that even the court reporter's fingers paused. Lena tried to swallow her tears, but the entire room had heard that void. Max tried next, his voice strained, saying his father was irrational and no longer capable of handling money. Weber didn't counter with emotion. He countered with a ledger. He placed it on the witness stand, its pages yellowed with age, each line a number highlighted in yellow and blue. 36 months, late rent, utility bills, an air conditioner repair, a wedding deposit. Weber read each item clearly, his voice as even as a hammer's tap. The total, $33,400. The number landed in the courtroom like a dropped stone. Max's lips moved, his voice cracking, not with emotion, but with the starkness of the exposure. Davis, the neighbor, testified that the camera system proved Robert had a problem. But then Weber asked, "Do you recall the break-in 3 houses down from yours? Did you have a camera to provide any evidence?" Davis stammered, his voice lost, and his credibility slipped through his fingers like sand. When the real witnesses took the stand, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Dr. Moore, the psychologist, presented the results of PSYMR221. Robert had scored highly on every single metric of the competency evaluation. He was not a confused old man, but a fully lucid individual who understood his rights and his responsibilities. She read a few excerpts, concluding with a simple sentence: "There is no basis to question his capacity." Mr. Green, the pharmacist, took the stand with a look of embarrassment. He admitted to having mistakenly signed a document Lena had given him, thinking it was for insurance. He now submitted a new affidavit, GR21, correcting the record and stating clearly, "That was not my testimony. I was taken advantage of." The other customers in the courtroom murmured, and the sound of shifting chairs echoed as the community tilted to one side. Summers, the locksmith, confirmed he had replaced the old lock with an ANSI Grade 1 deadbolt. Ethan, the camera engineer, described the details of the NVR system, the logs, and, most importantly, the 2-minute and 44-second clip of Max and Lena searching the house. The technical evidence was silent but sharp as a knife. Finally, Robert stood. His voice was low and steady. They said it was love, but it wasn't. It was a transaction, a relentless negotiation where every hug was valued in dollars, and every word of thanks was replaced by a new demand. Love doesn't need a ledger. But this, he held up the book, this was their ledger. The statement was so powerful that even the stenographer paused for a second. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Miller looked down, shuffling through the papers, weighing each piece of evidence as if testing the gravity of the truth. Then she looked up, her voice calm but final. Guardianship denied. 2 simple words, but they resonated with the weight of a verdict. The entire room seemed to exhale at once. Max hung his head, his shoulders slumped. Lena covered her face, but this time, there was no audience for her tears. Fisher gathered his papers without another word, and Robert, he sat back down, his hands resting on the closed ledger. He didn't smile or clap in victory, just a long, slow breath, like a door being gently closed behind him. The court record documented exhibits A through Z, the psychological report, the pharmacist's affidavit, the $33,400 ledger, and the brief minute order. Petition denied. In the hallway, neighbors gathered, talking in low tones, their eyes no longer holding pity for Robert, but respect. The family drama was no longer a private matter. It had become a social verdict. And this time, justice had tilted in his favor. Robert walked out of the courthouse, the afternoon light casting a pale gold on the steps. He slowly zipped his jacket, his eyes looking straight ahead. This victory wasn't luck. It was won with numbers, with principles, and with patience. His freedom had been affirmed, and that, he knew, was just the beginning of a new life. Over 99% of you will watch this story to the end without hitting like or subscribe. It's actually pretty easy, it just takes a single click. What time is it, where you are, and where are you listening from? That morning, the early sun stretched across the dew-wet lawn in front of the old house. I stood still, my hand resting on the for sale sign that had been flipped to a bold red. Sold. The realtor had just left, leaving me with a thin envelope containing a copy of deed number DE4472, confirming the transfer of ownership. Everything happened so quietly that it felt like I had just closed the door behind me without needing to hear the lock click. The 4 walls that had once held fake laughter, demanding phone calls, and envelopes of rent money on the kitchen table were now just memories, sealed within the closed pages of my old ledger. That same afternoon, I drove downtown with a few small boxes. My new condo was on the 14th floor, with a glass window overlooking the river where, at night, The lights reflected on the water like a living painting. The balcony was just big enough for a single metal chair and a pot of rosemary, but it was that sense of just enough that brought me peace. I opened the box, took out Linda's picture frame, wiped it clean, and placed it on a shelf near the window. Her gentle smile caught the morning light, bringing a soul to the otherwise empty room. Then, I took the family finance principle sign, smoothed its edges, and taped it neatly to the inside of a kitchen cabinet. This time, it wasn't for anyone else to see. It was just for me, a reminder that I had learned the lesson and would not take a step back. The following week, I went to the credit union. Weber came with me to help review the paperwork. I opened a small trust fund, VET Trust 091, funded by accumulated interest and a portion of my savings. When the teller asked its purpose, I replied, to pay the electric bills, water bills, or for a hot meal for local veterans when they're in need. The young woman nodded, printed the document, and handed it to me to sign. The sound of the pen on the paper was firm, no longer shaky like it had been during those coerced signings. For me, each letter I wrote that day was not just a formality but a new promise. From now on, I would choose who was worthy of my help. The day I posted a notice about the fund at the VFW hall, the air was thick with the smell of cheap coffee and polished wood. I pinned the paper to the information board. Emergency support for local veterans. No cash. Bills to be sent to the trust for direct payment. A few gray-haired men glanced at it and gave slow, deliberate nods. No praise, no flowery words, just that heavy nod. I knew they understood. This time, help was being offered on principle, not for exploitation. That evening, I visited the cemetery on the hill. Linda's headstone was clean, the yellow daisies I left last time now dry. I sat on the grass, took the old ledger from my backpack, and flipped through its pages. The scent of dry ink and damp paper rose like the smell of time itself. I looked at the recorded number, $33,400, a figure that had once brought me shame, and found myself smiling. On the last page, I added one more line. I stopped being an ATM. I placed the book on her grave, a belated but necessary confession. The wind made the pages flutter, as if Linda were reading them and nodding. There, the silence was no longer frightening. It was an ally. A week later, Eleanor hosted a barbecue in her backyard. String lights were draped between two maple trees. The grill sizzled, and soft country music played in the background. My friends from the VFW were all there. Maria brought potato salad, Carmen made a peach cobbler, and Alfreda had a jar of homemade pickles. I carved the brisket and listened to them talk about baseball and laugh about life. When Eleanor mentioned the trial and the guardianship denied verdict, the group broke into applause. Not for the drama, but for the simple justice of it. I laughed, a real unforced laugh. Laughter ran unforced. Amidst the smoke from the grill and the warm yellow lights, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I was laughing at myself. On Sunday morning, a white envelope was in my condo's mailbox. The handwriting was familiar. Max. I took it upstairs, made a cup of coffee, and sat down at my table. The letter opener slid through, revealing 3 pages of handwritten text. It was a half-hearted apology, filled with half-baked excuses, and ended with an invitation to have lunch, to talk like a family. I read it all, set the letter down, and looked at Linda's picture. There was no anger left, just a lingering, old exhaustion. I took a postcard with a picture of the downtown river and wrote a single word, honor. No explanation, no blame. I slid it into an envelope and sealed it. It was the last answer I had to give. A few days later, the realtor called to remind me about the vacation house that had been tied up in the loan application. She asked if I was sure I wanted to withdraw my signature, that they were confident I'd change my mind. I smiled to myself. They thought I'd fight over a vacation house. I quietly withdrew my cosign that morning. The house was just the first domino. I read her the reference number for the withdrawal form I'd filed the day of the trial. She was silent for a few seconds, then said, "Understood, sir." The last loose thread had been tied off. From then on, life slowed down. In the mornings, I'd walk along the river, stop at the bakery for a croissant, and ask the woman behind the counter what color the sky was that day. In the afternoons, I'd read on my balcony, the sun shining on Linda's picture. In the evenings, I'd call my sister in Chicago, not to send money, but to hear her talk about her garden, about the neighbor who just had knee surgery, about the soup she was making. No more urgent calls. No more false reports. Just real stories. Sometimes, the condo security camera would alert me to motion. I'd check the feed and see only a dog walker, a pizza delivery guy, a young couple arguing and then making up. I would turn off the screen, letting the small red light blink in the darkness like a steady breath. The social eye was still there, but this time it was watching over a community, not my private courtroom. One rainy night, I went back to the cemetery. I took the damp ledger, tore out a page and wrote, "The legacy I built was honor, living what you chose." I tucked it back into the book and left it where it was. The rain soaked my hair and my jacket, but I felt warm inside. For the first time, I felt like I was standing on the right side of the line, the side of honor. The day the VET Trust 091 paid its first electric bill for an elderly veteran in the neighborhood, he took my hand, his own trembling, and said just 2 words, "Thank you." Those 2 words carried more weight than all the promises of being paid back I had ever heard. That evening, at the VFW, we grilled hamburgers as the sky turned purple, the smell of charcoal mixing with the scent of old rain, the sound of laughter blended with a baseball game on the radio. No one asked me about winning or losing. They just passed the ketchup and asked, "You want spicy or regular?" I knew then I belonged at that table. Back at the condo, I took down the family finance principal sign and taped it back up, pressing the edges down firmly. The circle was closed, not to trap me in the past, but to remind me that I had learned and I had changed. I poured a small glass of wine and sat watching the city sparkle outside my window. In the frame, Linda's smile was still bright. I whispered, "The legacy I built was honor." I closed the door, not with anger, but with a profound sense of peace. I set the glass down and turned off the lights, letting the darkness embrace the room. This time, peace came with paperwork, with evidence, and with the deep, quiet stillness of a new life.